Good morning, everyone. Today's class is going to be on the management of advanced carcinoma esophagus. So, last two classes were on early stage and locally advanced, and today we'll be looking at how we approach a patient with advanced carcinoma esophagus who is not suitable for any kind of curative intent local therapy and is mainly treated with a palliative intent. So the outline of the class will be, we look at different systemic therapy approaches that are used to manage patients with advanced esophageal carcinoma, including chemotherapy, targeted agents, and immunotherapy, and other new drugs, and what other palliative therapy that we need to use in this setting, and how to approach a patient, not just for the systemic therapy point of view, but for other things such as nutrition, other supportive care, palliative care, management of the most important symptom in these patients, which is dysphagia, which all is very important, not just giving systemic therapy. So how do we approach a patient with advanced esophageal carcinoma? So the first thing is, what is our goal? What do we want to achieve in these patients? So our goal is to palliate symptoms, improve the quality of life, and definitely prolong survival. And what is important is how therapy has evolved over the years to help us meet these goals. And initially, survival in this group of patients was not very much, but now with newer therapies, survivals have improved significantly over time. Also, the importance of early supportive care in these patients, not just giving chemotherapy or immunotherapy, but nutritional, psychological support, palliative care, and how we need to have an interdisciplinary approach to these patients so that they get the benefit of our systemic therapy is seen. And the third most important thing is, with the advent of immunotherapy, especially in the first line setting, and newer targeted therapies coming, the choice of therapy, how to choose, and the importance of biomarker testing, and which patients will respond to which drug is important. So let's look at the guidelines. What do they say? What do the guidelines say for the management of esophageal carcinoma, squamous or adeno, in the first line setting, in a situation where the patient is not suitable for any curative therapy? So these are the latest NCCN guidelines. If you look at the guidelines, you can see there are so many options. And there is the boxes which I have placed highlight the changes that have happened in the past 1 year. So there have been significant developments since that last time I took this class in the treatment in the first line setting for metastatic or recurrent or unresectable esophageal carcinoma. So like we know, in patients who have HER2 overexpression, we always try to target it with trastuzumab with the chemotherapy backbone. But in HER2 negative population, there has been the new additions to the treatment guidelines, that is the use of immunotherapy in the first line. Previously, about a year or 2 years ago, immunotherapy was mainly approved for the second or the third line setting in patients who failed at least one line of chemotherapy, which include a fluoropyrimidine and a platinum. But here you can see that for adenocarcinomas, for squamous cell carcinomas, and in some cases for both, there is evidence to support the use of immunotherapy with chemotherapy in the first line setting. And also there is early evidence to show that immunotherapy combined with trastuzumab and chemotherapy may be beneficial. So these have been added to the guidelines. So these are the main changes now, that we have new, more effective options rather than our standard chemotherapy to help these patients. Just an overview of what happens once the patient progresses on first line therapy. We know this is not a curative setting, so at some point of time they don't respond to the first line therapy, so second or subsequent lines. Again, like I had spoken about, nivolumab and pembrolizumab were approved for patients after progression on at least one line of chemotherapy. Then anti-VEGF agent also approved in adenocarcinoma for patients who have progressed on prior chemo. And there's a new drug which is a trastuzumab deruxtecan, which is also been approved based on early phase 2 studies for patients who have progressed on trastuzumab chemotherapy in HER2 positive adenocarcinoma of the esophagus. And in certain circumstances in patients, these are rare but may occur, like NTRK gene fusions, patients who are MSI high, who have mismatch repair deficient or high TMBs, pembrolizumab is also approved for these agents. So we'll go through these systemic therapy options one by one. Coming to the oldest and the most commonly used systemic therapy in this scenario is chemotherapy. We know that we are giving it in the palliative intent. There is a question of whether will chemotherapy in advanced esophageal cancer benefit the patient, especially in patients who are frail and elderly. That is an ongoing debate, but with better drugs and better immunotherapy regimens available, this benefit is seen, a survival benefit has been seen. Commonly what we use is either a single agent or a 2-drug combination. The 3-drug combination is slowly going out of use. Nobody commonly uses it now because multiple direct and indirect evidence has shown that using 3 drugs like the ECF or the DCF regimen doesn't really add so much to the survival, especially when immunotherapy has come into the picture and has significant toxicity. So that is not our approach. Most commonly in our setting, we tend to use 2-drug combinations in fit patients and single agents in patients with borderline fitness. In a patient who's very poor, with very poor performance status and very unfit, it would be best supportive care alone. So what is the optimal regimen? There have been multiple trials for multiple drugs in both esophageal squamous carcinoma and adenocarcinoma. Some of them have been directly compared. So we will discuss them in subsequent slides, but some of them have no direct comparison. So there is a debate on what would be the optimal regimen. However, we have multiple options which we can tailor based on the patient fitness and tolerability. So these are the options. So this is a 5-fluoropyrimidine with a platinum, either oxaliplatin or cisplatin, which is one of the options commonly used in adenocarcinomas. The other commonly used option that we commonly use, and it is easier and more convenient to administer, would be taxanes with a platinum, that is paclitaxel or paclitaxel and docetaxel with the platinum. And you can see these are the triplet regimens which we hardly use here, that is the dosi-carbo 5-FU or the dosi 5-FU cisplatin regimens. Also, there are irinotecan 5-FU regimens which can be used in the first line setting. I will not go into the each and every regimen one by one because there are other things that we have to discuss, but this is an overview of the chemotherapy regimens. So this is a table which I put just to show that with all the chemotherapy regimens over the years, which have evolved from single agent cisplatin comparing cis-5-FU to ECF to the doublets of 5-FU oxali and capecitabine oxali and DCF and irinotecan 5-FU doublets, the survival, overall survival with these various regimens ranges from 8 months to 12 months, more or less. This is where it kind of stops, and there are no, most of the trials show a range in this benefit, and beyond that we don't see additional survival. So this is where the immunotherapy has changed outcomes in this group of patients. So I'll just quickly go through few of the historical studies which just to show how chemotherapy in esophageal cancer evolved. So these are one of the earliest studies where the EORTC trial where single agent cisplatin was compared to 5-FU cisplatin. And as you know, if you use a doublet, you have higher response rates, and they saw a survival benefit, but it was more toxic. Over time, doublets have changed from using cis-5-FU to paclitaxel with carboplatin, docetaxel with carboplatin, or 5-FU with a less toxic platinum, that is oxaliplatin, and single agents also have been used. So I will not spend too much time. This is the ECF study which compared ECF to FAM-TX. This was in gastric and gastroesophageal cancers. And the ECF triplet had a overall survival benefit, better response rates, better failure-free survival. And there were other studies which also had compared ECF to other backbone regimens like mitomycin, cisplatin, and they also showed a benefit with ECF. But slowly over time, because of the difficulty in administering ECF and the toxicities, there were studies that were done to substitute 5-FU with a more convenient 5-fluoropyrimidine like capecitabine and cisplatin with a less toxic platinum like oxaliplatin. So this is a real 2 study. Again, this study included patients from stomach, gastroesophageal junction, and esophagus. And they addressed this question, whether 5-FU can be substituted by capecitabine and look for non-inferiority of capecitabine versus 5-FU, and whether we replace cisplatin versus oxali. And if you look at the survival, the median overall survival didn't change actually when you substituted 5-FU with capecitabine or if you substituted cisplatin with oxaliplatin. And in this arm where both were substituted, actually the overall survival was better. The response rates again were similar. So this study concluded that we could replace 5-FU with capecitabine, it's easier to administer, and cisplatin with oxaliplatin. So these are the survival curves which show no significant difference. So the next evolution in the therapy of esophageal cancer was the addition of docetaxel in the V325 study, where docetaxel was added to CF in patients with gastric and GE junction tumors. And again, triplet showed a significant benefit in terms of response rates as well as survival. But this was a very toxic regimen. You can see the incidence of neutropenia, leukopenia, anemia was significantly higher, and more than 80% of patients who received DCF had grade 3 to 4 toxicities. So this regimen is not commonly used, especially in our setting. There was a modified DCF a regimen which was used, modifying the doses, and this showed that there was a better tolerability, and this was efficacious, and there was improved efficacy, and could be substituted for the original DCF. So the question is, again, we have so many chemotherapy options, which would be the best option and the safest option, in both in terms of safety and efficacy. So this is just an example of a network meta-analysis which I put, where they studied 17 chemotherapy regimens, and they compared 37 for overall survival and 29 for progression-free survival. And one thing that this meta-analysis showed is giving some form of chemotherapy improved survival as compared to best supportive care, except in case of anthracycline monotherapy. And what they showed is that 5-FU doublets like 5-FU oxaliplatin, irinotecan, or taxane were better than using cisplatin doublets or anthracycline triplets or DCF because of the toxicity point of view. And there was no benefit in giving anthracycline containing triplets or TCF triplets over 5-FU doublets, both for overall survival and progression-free survival. That is why these regimens are now slowly going out of use and are of historical interest. So we come to the end of first-line chemotherapy. Second-line chemotherapy, these are the commonly used drugs: docetaxel, paclitaxel, irinotecan, and chemo with ramucirumab. So these are the options which I've highlighted here are what we commonly use in our day-to-day practice. It also depends on the patient's fitness at that time, and also what regimen the patient had received in the first-line setting. So the question is, like we see in most of the trials for both chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and targeted agents, patients who are enrolled are much fitter. They have a performance status usually of 0 and 1, whereas in our clinic, the most common the patient we see is much frailer, usually has nutritional issues, low body weight, and is older. With commonly what we see in our clinic is a performance status of 1 or 2, some patients presenting with a performance status of 3. So the question is, how do we manage our patients? Is all the data that we have applicable to patients in our scenario? So, and especially when we are dealing with older and frailer patients in our setting. So this was a paper which was a phase 3 clinical trial published, which showed the efficacy of reduced intensity chemotherapy. There have been very few studies addressing about how we would decrease the dose of chemotherapy in esophageal carcinoma and whether it will be as efficacious in older and frailer patients. So this study addressed that. And they basically, this study compared Capox, that was capecitabine 625 mg per meter square twice a day, and oxaliplatin at 130 mg per meter square. That was a standard dose. And then they had reduced dose arms for these elderly and frail patients. That was 0.6 times and 0.8 times the dose. So if you look at these graphs, arm A is the full dose, B is the 0.8 times dose, and C is the 0.6 times dose. And they showed that dose reducing this regimen did not really impact the progression-free survival, because almost all three curves are almost overlapping, or the overall survival. Again, there's slight separation here, but ultimately all three curves overlap. And so probably dose reducing capecitabine and oxaliplatin is feasible in older and frailer patients. This is not applicable or generalizable to all regimens, but this is something, a food for thought for us to understand that we need to modify our treatment or chemotherapy doses based on the patient's fitness and age, especially since we have a very poor or frail cohort of patients with esophageal cancer. This last curve shows that patients who had reduced chemotherapy did better than best supportive care. Now, coming to the role of immune checkpoint inhibitors, immune checkpoint inhibitors have played a major role in systemic therapy in nearly all cancers now. So we'll look at the role of immune checkpoint inhibitors in esophageal cancer. So since in the past 1 year, there has been a lot of new evidence for use of immune checkpoint inhibitors in esophageal cancers, especially in the first line setting. Some studies show a clear benefit, and it is a strong evidence for using these drugs in the first line setting. But there are others, especially in adenocarcinoma, where there is some conflict in the results in different studies in the same group. So again, this is the same slide which I showed earlier, where it shows that nivolumab can be used with the chemotherapy backbone for adenocarcinomas with a PDL with a CPS of more than 5. Pembrolizumab has also been approved for use with the chemotherapy backbone in adenos or in squamous cell with their CPS of more than 10. So there is the CPS less than 5 in adenocarcinoma. It's a category 2 recommendation because of the lack of clear benefit. And in patients who have the chemo backbone can either be 5-FU capecitabine and either platinum oxali or cis. Some studies have used oxaliplatin like the Checkmate 649. Some have used cisplatin. So this is the same. This shows the schedule: nivolumab with capecitabine oxaliplatin or 5-FU leucovorin oxaliplatin. This was the Checkmate 649, and this was the cisplatin or the 5-FU cisplatin, which was used in Keynote 590. We'll go through all these trials one by one. So this is just an overview of the studies which have been recently completed in first line setting for advanced metastatic or recurrent esophageal cancer. So this is the Keynote 11, where pembro and trastuzumab was combined and compared to chemo versus trastuzumab. This is the Checkmate 649, 648, and 590. I will discuss in detail in the subsequent slides. So this is a summary table which I've made because there are so many studies and it is a little confusing to remember which study and what are the results. So the studies here in yellow, what you can see are the Checkmate 648 and the Keynote 590, which predominantly included squamous cell carcinoma patients. This is only squamous cell carcinoma. This was 73% squamous cell carcinoma. These were the adenocarcinoma studies, and most of them had esophagus and G junction. These adenocarcinoma studies, as expected, included gastric cancer also. And not all the studies, only one study required a PDL1 of more than 1 to be included. All the other studies enrolled patients irrespective of the PDL1 status. Most of them did not stratify, except 3 studies stratified it. Some did not stratify for randomization also. And I have just an overview of the results. The Checkmate 648 and the Keynote 590 were positive studies. They showed there was a benefit in adding nivolumab to chemotherapy. And here it was pembrolizumab to chemotherapy in this subgroup of patients. And for overall survival, the Keynote showed a benefit for progression-free survival as well. In the Checkmate 648, I've put it in yellow because here the chemo and the nivo arm was superior for progression-free survival over chemo, but they had another arm of nivolumab ipilimumab, which was superior for OS, but not for progression-free survival. And this was a Checkmate 649 study. The difference is here the histology was adenocarcinoma. Again, here this study showed that adding nivo and chemo as compared to chemo alone was superior, especially in the CPS more than 5 group, both for overall survival and progression-free survival. This also had a nivo-ipi arm, which did not have a significant benefit, so I have not mentioned it here. These 2 studies highlighted in pink addressed the same group as this Checkmate 649 study, which was adenocarcinoma who were HER2 negative, but they were negative studies. They did not show a benefit. The attraction only showed a PFS benefit. This was with nivolumab, but no OS benefit. And this was it was a smaller study as compared to the Checkmate 649, but it was a negative study. The addition of pembrolizumab to chemotherapy backbone did not help either in the overall survival or the progression-free survival. The difference, I've made the summary table so that we remember that there is a bit of a conflicting data in patients with adenocarcinoma, which subgroups benefit. Some studies have taken CPS 10 as the cutoff and said that adeno as well has benefit in this study as well. Some studies have included a CPS of 5 and some of 1. And this study showed a clear benefit of patients with the addition of immunotherapy to chemotherapy in CPS of 5. But this was a negative study using a similar patient population. So the evidence is strong for esophageal squamous carcinoma, especially patients who have PDL1 expression, which is higher, that is a CPS of more than 10. It is modest in patients with adenocarcinoma who have a CPS of more than 5. But in patients for adenocarcinoma who have CPS less than 5, the data is not so strong to recommend it as a standard first-line therapy. Partly, these studies have been negative because of the subsequent second-line treatment and crossovers, which we'll discuss later. So coming to the first study, which was shown in the table, this was a CheckMate 648, where it had the standard arm, which was 5-FU cisplatin, Nivo arm, which added nivolumab to the chemotherapy, and a Nivo-Ipi arm. And like we discussed, there was a benefit for addition of nivolumab to chemotherapy as compared and ipilimumab as well. So both these immunotherapy arms had a better survival as compared to the chemo arm in both groups. In the group that was the primary endpoint, that is PDL1 more than 1%, as well as the overall population of the study. This was similar for progression-free survival. Nivo and chemotherapy definitely improved progression-free survival as compared to the chemotherapy alone arm. But and Nivo-Ipi numerically improved, but Nivo-Ipi did not improve the progression-free survival and did not meet the pre-specified threshold. So these are the response rates. Obviously, the Nivo chemotherapy arm had a better response rate in both the PDL1 population and as well as all randomized patients. And a longer duration of response was seen in the immunotherapy arms, where we see chemotherapy arm, it's only 5.7 and 7.1. So we know that addition of nivolumab to chemotherapy improved overall survival in patients with squamous cell carcinoma of the esophagus, especially the benefit was significant in the PDL1 more than 1% population, and even Nivo-Ipi had a benefit in this group. However, there was no benefit with Nivo-Ipi for progression-free survival, and this was a potential, that authors said that this was a potential new first-line treatment. Coming to the next study, this is the Keynote 590 study which was presented in ESMO, and this was what we had discussed during the Journey Club last week. So this was a study that included both histologies, adeno and squamous, and they were treatment naive patients. They were very fit patients of PS 0 and 1, and they had to have measurable disease. The enrollment was not based on the PDL1 status. Everybody could be included. They did not even stratify due to PDL1. They received cis-5-FU as the chemotherapy backbone with pembrolizumab, and they had dual primary endpoints. So they had overall survival and progression-free survival. They tested the overall survival in 4 groups: esophageal squamous carcinoma who had a PDL of more than 10, then esophageal squamous cell carcinoma PDL10 population, and the overall population. Similarly, they tested PFS in 3 groups, that is esophageal squamous cell carcinoma, PDL CPS more than 10, and all the population, and they had secondary endpoint as response rates. So just to point out that this study has been approved for both squamous cell and adenocarcinoma as first line by the FDA, but adenocarcinoma was only about 26 to 27% in both arms. So it was a smaller population in the study. This is predominantly driven by the squamous carcinoma. So probably the benefit is also driven by the benefits in the squamous carcinoma. So these are the Kaplan-Meier curves in all the groups that they tested. So this was the PDL1 CPS more than 10 esophageal squamous carcinomas. This was the esophageal squamous carcinomas overall. This was the overall population who had a PDL1 CPS of more than 10, and this was the entire study cohort. And in all 4 groups, that were the 4 hypotheses for the OS primary endpoint, it met the endpoint and it was a positive study. There was a benefit with pembrolizumab. Similarly, for PFS in the 3 populations, that is squamous carcinoma, PDL of CPS more than 10, and the overall population, pembro improved the progression-free survival. And this is the subgroup analysis. You can see almost all subgroups benefited except the PDL1 CPS less than 10 crossed the unity. And so this was a group that may not benefit as much. Similarly, here almost all subgroups, age, gender, ECOG PS, area where they come from, and histology all had a progression-free survival benefit with the addition of pembrolizumab, except the PDL1 less than 10 again touched unity. So to conclude, the conclusion from the study was that addition of pembrolizumab improved survival in patients with esophageal carcinoma advanced, which was not suitable for any curative treatment. And it also improved the progression-free survival. It met all the endpoints at the first interim analysis, and it has been recommended as the first-line therapy. However, there is a slight caveat. There are subsequent studies where, older studies before this study, which included patients with esophageal adenocarcinoma, which didn't show a benefit. The other thing is a significant benefit is driven by patients with esophageal carcinoma and patients with a CPS of more than 10. So the question arises, to adenocarcinomas with lower CPS values of less than 10 or less than 5 for that matter, how much would be the benefit by the addition of immunotherapy? So this was the conclusion of the study. This is another study which uses the Chinese PD-1 inhibitor toripalimab. Similar study design, but the chemo arm is something which we use, that is paclitaxel. And again, they had a better survival with the addition of toripalimab to this chemo backbone, both for overall and progression-free survival. So coming to adenocarcinoma, adenocarcinomas similar to the CheckMate 648, there was a CheckMate 649 study, similar design where nivolumab with chemo, nivolumab and EP, and a control arm which was chemotherapy, which was compared. So here only the difference is, instead of 5-FU cis, it was 5-FU with oxaliplatin or capecitabine with oxaliplatin, and here it was gastric GE junction or esophageal adenocarcinomas who were HER2 negative. And the primary endpoint was to see this OS and this study was a positive pembrolizumab. If you look at the 12-month benefit, there was almost 11% increase in the overall survival in patients who received nivolumab in the patients who had a PD-L1 of CPS of more than 5. So the benefit was seen in all randomized patients also, but here it was slightly less than the patients who had a PD-L1 CPS of more than 5. There was a progression-free benefit also seen in this group of a CPS more than 5, as well as in the group with CPS more than 1, and in all randomized patients. So this is a slide showing the same thing, a better survival with the addition of chemotherapy in this group of patients. What they also saw is, as you go higher, the CPS increases, the survival is better. So here they compared like OS in patients of CPS less than 1 and the CPS of more than 1. And you can see here the hazard ratio was 0.92, but here it is 0.76. Similarly, for less than 5 and more than 5, here it's 0.94, and this is 0.7, which means to say that the survival benefit with addition of immunotherapy in this study was higher at higher PDL cutoffs. So patients who had a higher PDL CPS did better. That was the thing. It was similarly seen for progression-free survival. And this is the overall response rate. This showed that patients who had immunotherapy and chemotherapy had a better response rate as compared to chemotherapy alone in all subgroups, irrespective of the PD-L1 status. This was an updated result of this study, which was presented in ESMO this year, where they also presented results of the Nivo-IP arm. And Nivo-IP arm did not improve the OS in patients with PD-L1 of CPS more than 5. In contrast to the 648 in squamous, where for the overall survival, there was a benefit with Nivo-IP. In this study, did not benefit neither in the PD-L1 CPS enriched population, nor in the entire study population. But another thing that they showed in this study was that in patients who had MSI high, the immunotherapy arms, that is both nivolumab chemo and Nivo-IP, had better survivals and better objective response rates. So MSI high tumors could also benefit with the addition of nivolumab to chemotherapy for adenocarcinomas. This is one of the studies which was negative. So this was a study which included the same group of gastric GE junction carcinomas who were unresectable, metastatic, or recurrent. The chemotherapy arm was similar, where it was 5-FU cis or capecitabine with cis, and here pembrolizumab was used. But this study did not meet its primary endpoint. It did not even meet its primary endpoint in the CPS more than 10 population, which was seen to do better. For the other pembrolizumab study, this population, like in the Keynote 590, did better as compared to chemotherapy. But here you can see the lines cross, and initially the difference is not so apparent. There's a benefit. The hazard ratio is 0.69, but this does not meet the preset statistical endpoint in this study, and this was a negative study. However, what they saw is in patients who had MSI high with a PDL CPS more than 1, addition of pembrolizumab improved the survivals, both single agent as well as pembro and chemo. So here, this is the results of the study where pembro was not, and it was not significant. It was not tested further because it did not show a benefit. So Pembro plus chemo was not superior again, neither in the CPS of more than 1 nor in the CPS of more than 10. And though median OS was prolonged with pembrolizumab in the MSI high tumors in the patients with PDL of more than 10, this group, it was not formally tested further because it did not meet the primary endpoint. So this was the comparisons that there was a discussion on during our journal club on what do we choose, whether we take the cutoff for CPS of more than 10, more than equal to 10 or more than equal to 5 in case of adenocarcinomas, and how do we choose which regimen to use. So this is a comparison of the two studies which address this issue in adenocarcinomas. One was positive and one was a negative study. The immunotherapy here was nivolumab, it was pembrolizumab. Most likely the population taken was the same. Here there was a slight difference in the chemo where one used Oxali and one used Cis, but unlikely. PDL1 assay was different. But the significant fact that could have led to the difference in these studies is the post-trial therapy. Whereas you can see that in the Keynote 62, which was a negative trial, more than half patients had received post-trial therapy, and of them, 15% in the control group, that is in the chemo alone arm, received second line or third line immune checkpoint inhibitors. And this could have changed the the overall survival results. It was much less in the Checkmate 649 study, which was 8% in the control group received subsequent immunotherapy. So these are some confounding factors for the role of the addition of upfront immunotherapy in the first line setting to chemotherapy in adenocarcinomas. Then this is Attraction 4 study, which is the nivolumab with chemotherapy and placebo plus chemotherapy. This is also a study with mixed results where there was a benefit in the progression-free survival. At 1 year, you can see there was almost a 14% increase in the progression-free survival with the addition of nivolumab, but there was no benefit in the overall survival. And again, there are differences in the study. Probably the benefit seen in Checkmate 649 in patients with a CPS of more than 5, but it was not seen in Attraction 4. And a lot of discussion was done on this during this year's ESMO. And what they noted was, if you look at the Checkmate 649 study closely, in the groups that they have had the endpoints, that is the CPS more than 5, CPS more than 1 in all patients, you can see that most of the patients in the CPS more than 1 and in the total population had a CPS of more than 5. So this study had a significant group of patients with a CPS more than 5 tumors, which probably is not representative of the entire adenocarcinoma of GE junction population, and probably the study was positive due to that, whereas the other two studies were negative. So this brings us to the end of first-line immunotherapy. I'll just go back to the summary slide to just summarize, since there were so many trials. So there are 5 major trials which we have discussed. In the evidence for squamous cell carcinoma is stronger for the addition of immunotherapy to chemotherapy in the first-line setting. It could be nivolumab with chemotherapy based on the Checkmate 648, or it could be pembrolizumab with chemotherapy based on the Keynote 590. Based on the Keynote 590, there seems to be a benefit for adenocarcinomas as well. But there are 2 other trials which were negative for adenocarcinomas. So there's a slight debate on what is the role of immunotherapy in the first-line setting for adenocarcinomas. But overall, what is the conclusion is that immunotherapy in the first-line setting, adding it to chemotherapy in esophageal adenocarcinomas or squamous cell carcinomas, has improved outcomes. There has been significant overall survival benefit. What we need to note is that we need to select the biomarker and select the population that will benefit, because across all studies, it has been noted that patients who have a CPS which is higher, or there is a PDL1 CPS or PDL1 expression higher, they do better than those who have lower CPS scores. So selecting the appropriate patient is important. In most of the studies, overall survival has improved. There are some caveats. So I would conclude by saying that if the patient can afford and is fit, probably in squamous cell carcinomas and carcinomas with a CPS of more than 10, we should offer immunotherapy with chemotherapy in the first-line setting. In an adenocarcinoma who's HER2 negative, if the CPS is more than 5, we would offer immunotherapy and chemotherapy. In less than 5, we would explain to the patient that the benefit may not be great and probably could reserve it for the second-line setting. So coming to the second-line immunotherapy, so patients, second-line immunotherapy, actually the studies of the trials for second-line immunotherapy were published before the first-line immunotherapy. Just a brief overview, there were 6 major studies which I have shown here: the Attraction 3, the Escort, Keynote 181, 61, Attraction 2, Keynote 180, and Javelin. This study was for the use of nivolumab versus chemotherapy in patients who have progressed with one prior line of therapy. This was a positive study based on which nivolumab was approved for the use of in the second line setting for esophageal squamous carcinoma without a biomarker. It's irrespective of the PD-L1. This is a similar study where camrelizumab, another PD-1 inhibitor developed in China, was used, and the backbone, the comparator chemotherapy were Loci or Irino. Both these studies used single agent immunotherapy. No chemotherapy was combined. This is a study done in adenocarcinomas, that is the Keynote 181, which was Pembro compared to a chemotherapy, which was physician choice, either a taxane or irinotecan. Again, this study improved outcomes. So this has been approved for second line in the patient population with the CPS of more than 10. Whereas a similar study where a smaller but similar study where Pembro was compared to Paclitaxel single agent, it did not improve the overall survival. So here also there is a slight difference in results with adenocarcinomas of the esophagus, GE junction, or gastric adenocarcinomas. Attraction 2, again nivolumab and placebo. This was for third line, and based on this, again nivolumab can be used in the third line setting. And Keynote 180 also was a study done in the third line where pembrolizumab improved response rate. This was a phase 2 trial, so they had response rate as the primary endpoint, and this was better than giving a chemotherapy alone. So to summarize, second line therapy, esophageal squamous carcinoma, nivolumab can be used. Second line therapy in adenocarcinomas, squamous cell carcinomas with the CPS more than 10, pembrolizumab can be used. And patients with MSI high or deficient mismatched tumors, pembrolizumab can be used second or subsequent lines of therapy. So this is already discussed. This is the Attraction 3 study where it was nivolumab versus investigator's choice of chemotherapy. And here we can see there's a survival benefit, which is significant. It was 16% at 1 year and around 13% at 18 months. This is another second line study, which I already mentioned. This was in adenocarcinomas, Pembro versus investigator choice therapy. And again, there is a benefit both in the intention to treat and in the CPS more than 10 population, and also in the squamous cell carcinoma population. Third line and beyond, like I discussed, the Keynote 59, which showed better outcomes and duration of response, and the Keynote 180, again, which showed a better median overall survival in both the esophageal squamous cell carcinoma and the PDL CPS of more than 10. These are some ongoing studies where different strategy has been used. That is the use of immunotherapy with some targeted therapy. So lenvatinib, margetuximab, ramucirumab, paclitaxel, regorafenib, results are awaited. Margetuximab is one of the drugs which is a mAb targeting the HER2. So this is a non-chemo based regimen, and we will be awaiting the results of these studies. Coming to targeted therapy, so the 3 main groups of targeted therapy, that is anti-HER2, anti-VEGF, and anti-EGFR, have been tried in esophageal carcinomas. I will not be discussing anti-EGFR studies because they have not shown much success. So we'll focus on the anti-HER2 and the anti-VEGF therapies in esophageal carcinoma. So this is the table showing various targeted drugs that have been added. The one group is the anti-HER2 agents. These were the anti-EGFR agents, and these are the anti-VEGF agents. So you can see the anti-HER2 agents, this study had a benefit. Some of the studies did not show benefit with other anti-HER2 agents. And most of the studies with cetuximab or panitumumab did not show much benefit. The overall survivals were similar. So we'll discuss the first group of drugs, that is the anti-HER2 targeted therapy. So the first trial that established the role of this anti-HER2 targeting in esophageal carcinoma was the TOGA trial, the study which was mainly done in gastric and gastroesophageal junction tumors, and this showed an overall survival benefit for the addition of trastuzumab to chemotherapy. Chemotherapy was either 5-FU or capecitabine with cisplatin. And you can see again, like most studies, 90% of the patient had a performance status of 0 to 1, which doesn't happen commonly in our setting. Most of the tumors were stomach cancers, only 20% were esophageal, and 17% in the chemo arm and 20% in the trastuzumab chemo arm. Most of them had metastatic disease. Just a slide to show the staining pattern in HER2. There's a difference in the staining patterns for HER2 testing in breast and stomach or GE junction tumors, and that is because the gastrointestinal tumors do not express HER2 on the luminal surface, whereas breast you often see a circumferential staining. So there are different reporting guidelines for them. So this is the surgical specimen staining pattern. You can see here where more than 10% is 1+, and then more than 10% in basolateral or lateral membranes is 2+, and complete basolateral or lateral is 3+, because this is the sites where the HER2 is more expressed in the GE junction or adenocarcinoma of the stomach. So the TOGA trial showed benefit by addition of HER2. This is 5-fluoropyrimidine cisplatin with trastuzumab, which did better. There was a 2.7 months median overall survival benefit with a hazard ratio of 0.74, and patients did better. What they saw is if the patients had HER2 by IHC 3+ or HER2 by IHC 2+ with the FISH positive, they did much better. The benefit went up from like a 2.7 months to almost a 5 months benefit, where patients who had more HER2 expressing did significantly better with the addition of trastuzumab. So this became a standard of care in patients with gastric cancer who were HER2 positive and esophageal gastric adenocarcinomas who were HER2 positive. This is the same algorithm for IHC testing and in this group of patients. But there were many other trials which used other anti-HER2 therapies or different doses, and they were not successful. So this was the Helois study, which was in the first line. They used high dose of trastuzumab. It did not have a significant impact. The use of pertuzumab with trastuzumab did not have the impact in esophageal or gastric cancers as it had in breast cancer. Lapatinib also has been tried with chemotherapy or without chemotherapy, which did not show a significant benefit. But if you see in this Titan study, again, HER2 3+ seemed to do better. TDM1 also in the second line setting did not have a significant benefit. Also, trastuzumab beyond progression, that is continuing trastuzumab after disease progression, also did not seem to benefit these patients. So in the HER2 targeting therapy, trastuzumab after TOGA, many trials have been negative. So what is the reasons? The probable reason for this or the resistance to anti-HER2 therapy primarily is because of the intratumoral heterogeneity of HER2 expression in gastroesophageal and esophageal cancers. And then of course, activation of other pathways or new mutations which block the action of HER2 agents. Just a word about addition of immunotherapy to HER2 therapy. So there is the Keynote 811 study. This is an interim analysis. Final results are awaited, where they added pembro and to trastuzumab and chemotherapy and compared it to the TOGA regimen. And this is the initial interim analysis. So here they saw the overall response rates, which were much higher. It was almost 23% higher, than 22.27% higher than the control arm. That is, trastuzumab chemotherapy was 51, and the pembro addition to the same therapy was 74% response rates. And again, duration of response was better. So this is the waterfall plot, which is showing that addition of pembro has improved rates, but we are awaiting the final results of the study. So there are deeper, more durable and better responses with the addition of immunotherapy to the TOGA study regimen. There are some other novel drugs which are also in trials, that is trastuzumab deruxtecan. We'll briefly discuss this in the subsequent slides. Monoclonal antibodies like margetuximab with immuno or without immunotherapy. And there are some TKIs also targeting HER2, which are under trial. So trastuzumab deruxtecan is a new novel ADC, that is an antibody drug conjugate, which targets the HER2. And it also has an effect on the HER2 negative clone, and that is supposed to be one of the advantages over just trastuzumab alone. And it has a bystander effect. It kills the cells around also when there is this thing. So trastuzumab deruxtecan basically is trastuzumab with a linker, and deruxtecan, which is the payload, which is the cytotoxic agent. It is a topoisomerase 1 inhibitor, something similar to irinotecan. So this was the data from the Destiny Gastric 1, which again showed a response with trastuzumab deruxtecan. Destiny Gastric 1 study was done in patients who had progressed on more than 2 lines of therapy, that is including trastuzumab. It was adenocarcinoma of the gastric or GE junction, and they had failed 2 prior lines of therapy, one of which should have included trastuzumab, and there was a benefit with the addition of trastuzumab deruxtecan. And this was then subsequently published in the NEJM, and it had a role in third line or beyond. And in this study, but only a small population of gastroesophageal junction tumors were included. Majority of the patients in the study were gastric carcinomas, and you can see there was a OS and PFS benefit. There are subsequent studies which are ongoing, Destiny Gastric 2 and Destiny Gastric 4. Destiny Gastric 2 is evaluating the same drug in the second line setting, that is failure of one prior line of therapy. And again, here the response rates were better. And so now they are evaluating this drug in a phase 3 setting in Destiny Gastric 4 in the first line setting, and the results are awaited. So trastuzumab deruxtecan has been on these early phase 2 studies has been given approval for use in patients with gastric or GE junction tumors who are HER2 positive and who have progressed on a trastuzumab containing regimen. So it's a treatment option of patients who have failed prior chemo plus trastuzumab. Coming to anti-VEGF agents, bevacizumab, ramucirumab, both have been evaluated in esophageal cancer. So I'll be discussing ramucirumab in the role of ramucirumab in this setting. So ramucirumab, there were two studies, one which evaluated ramucirumab alone, comparing it to best supportive care in the third line setting, and the other which combined it with chemotherapy. And this is one of the options cited by the NCCN for second or subsequent lines of therapy in adenocarcinoma. So this was the Rainbow study which addressed this. So Rami was given with paclitaxel compared to placebo with paclitaxel, and this again included gastric or gastroesophageal junctions adenocarcinoma. And again, a small proportion of this study were esophageal cancers. Most of it were gastric carcinomas. But nevertheless, there was a benefit with ramucirumab plus paclitaxel over paclitaxel with placebo, both for the overall survival and the progression-free survival. It was a small benefit. If you see here, it was some 2.2 months for OS benefit, and it was some 1.3 months for PFS benefit. However, based on this data, it has been given approval for use in adenocarcinoma of the GE junction after failure of prior lines of therapy. REGARD was a study which was a placebo-controlled study. It was a blinded study, and here it was compared to placebo. That is, ramucirumab was compared to placebo. And again, here there was a benefit. It's a smaller benefit, but there was a benefit seen both for overall survival and progression-free survival in patients who have failed more than 3 lines of therapy. So after seeing all this evidence, we need to summarize on how we approach a patient with for systemic therapy of advanced esophageal or GE junction tumors. So like I discussed, supportive care, nutrition, other support, relieving dysphagia, and other goals of therapy are important. Along with that, we need to assess the histology and biomarkers. This is important in this day and age because there are so many new therapies which improve survival over just the previous old chemotherapy regimens. If it is a squamous cell carcinoma, based on the current evidence, giving pembrolizumab or nivolumab with chemotherapy should probably become standard of care. In an ideal scenario, a lot of our patients would not afford this standard of care, and we often resort to only chemotherapy. But this is an ideal scenario. In patients who have adenocarcinoma and a HER2 positive, we should target with HER2. May consider adding pembrolizumab based on the interim results of Keynote 811. If not, you could look at the mismatch repair or the MSI status and decide whether we want to add nivolumab to oxaliplatin containing chemotherapy, or look at the PDL1 status and look at whether the PDL1 is 0 to 4, CPS 5 to 10 or less than 10, and then decide on whether we want to add first line chemotherapy with immunotherapy in a patient with CPS more than 5 or more than 10. So we come to the end of the systemic therapy section. There's a few important points that we need to discuss in patients with advanced esophageal cancer: nutritional support, management of dysphagia, which is a primary symptom, pain management. So these are some of the ways we can palliate dysphagia in these patients. So there are options of stenting this patient by using self-expanding metal stents. In some patients, palliative radiation can help relieve the dysphagia, and then after that, we can move on to start systemic therapy. It could be both external beam radiation or brachytherapy. And in patients with severe obstruction, endoscopic stem, luminal enhancement, or wire-guided or balloon dilatation may be tried. But in patients with esophageal carcinoma, these procedures, there's a small risk of perforation. If neither of these are feasible, then bypass, gastrostomy, or jejunostomy also may be considered for maintaining nutrition. So I'll conclude with this. This was very, there was a lot of data and a lot of trials that were there. So to avoid any confusion, just remember a few points. Main is what is the goal of therapy, not just to relieve symptoms, especially dysphagia, but even survival is being improved with improvement in advances in therapy, especially with the addition of immunotherapy. Chemotherapy combinations, usually doublets, not triplets. In very fit, most of our patients end up on single agents because of the fitness. Poor PS, maybe best supportive care. With immunotherapy and the data in the first line setting, in all patients who are feasible, we should test for HER2 and PD-L1 in an adenocarcinoma and PD-L1 in a squamous cell carcinoma at least. So we can afford patients who can, we can offer patients who can afford immunotherapy in the first line setting based on these results. In the second and third line setting, based on what the patient has received in the prior lines. If he has received immunotherapy and progressed on immunotherapy, maybe immunotherapy may not be a suitable option, then chemo or targeted therapy. And also based on the patient's fitness. The future multiple targeted drugs, probably chemotherapy-free regimens for esophageal carcinoma might come up, where a lot of targeted agents are being combined with immunotherapy, and it might be improve. It might not only improve survival, but might be easier and less toxic for patients to, and for patients, less and better outcomes might be seen. So this is with this I'll conclude. I'll be happy to take any questions. There are some. So there are some questions on the chat. The first question is whether in Pembro FDA label is an all comers or CPS more than 10 was an unplanned subgroup analysis. So madam has answered that it was for patients who had a CPS of more than 10. That was the primary endpoint of the Keynote 590. It was not an unplanned subgroup analysis. And the second question by Amit sir was in HER2 positive metastatic adenocarcinoma.
Sorry, Nandini, can I interrupt?
Yes,
I corrected myself. This was my understanding also, but then I went and looked it up after Ningraj's question, and actually it is in all comers. So he is totally right here. So
yes, ma'am. I was coming to that. It is for all comers they have approved, but actually the study endpoint also showed there was a benefit in all comers. Only thing is the other studies which included didn't show a benefit. So there's a little bit of a caveat for adenocarcinoma, but the primary endpoint also had an all comers, which I missed saying that they saw it in all patients as well as esophageal and CPS more than 10. So, ma'am, what are your views? Should we use pembrolizumab with chemotherapy for all comers, or should we only select CPS more than 10 or esophageal carcinomas in this setting?
So, our disease is squamous, and it looks like from the bulk of the trials that the squamous carcinomas derive the maximum benefit. Even the ones who are PDL low. So maybe not PDL negative. So I think, I think in esophageal squamous cell carcinoma, I think immunotherapy does certainly have a role. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, where have we seen metastatic esophagus carcinoma with a median overall survival of 16 months? And pretty amazing results. So yes, I think that we should be considering it.
The other question is in HER2 positive adenocarcinoma, what are the current recommendations by Amit sir? So in HER2 positive adenocarcinomas, the current recommendation would be if HER2 is positive, target with an HER2 anti-HER2 therapy. Right now in the first line setting, trastuzumab is the only one which has shown a significant benefit. Maybe new drugs might come in the future. Whether antibody drug conjugates like trastuzumab deruxtecan will show a benefit in the first line setting, we will know only after the trials have results are available, because previous antibody drug conjugates targeting trastuzumab did not show any benefit. So right now probably HER2 with trastuzumab. The NCCN recommends addition of pembrolizumab to this trastuzumab plus chemotherapy regimen based on the Keynote 811, but this was only the interim results. So we could add it in an affording patient, but the final results of the study are still awaited. And then maybe if they progress and if the patient has some access to some trial where trastuzumab deruxtecan is there, then in subsequent lines we could offer that if the patient had an access, otherwise chemotherapy alone. Ma'am, sir, would you like to add to this?
No, I totally agree with you, Nandini. In fact, FDA has actually approved the combination. So trastuzumab, pembro plus Capox in patients who have HER2 adenocarcinoma. But again, that was based on the interim analysis, the response rate. So it was just very exciting response rates from 50 to 75%. But we await the survival results from Keynote 811. But it actually has an approval. So it is being used. And so we can consider it for our affording patients. It's just that both drugs are expensive, so difficult.
And the duration of pembrolizumab in most trials in this setting, ma'am, is 35 cycles they have given, which is nearly 2 years. So to offer 2 years of nivolumab or pembrolizumab in HER2 together would be a little difficult for our patients. Any other questions? Ma'am, I had one point that we were discussing last time in the JC. What would we do if the patient has an adenocarcinoma, can afford immunotherapy, and had a PDL1 CPS of between more than 5 but less than 10? What would be the ideal regimen? Should we just go ahead with the Keynote 590 result and offer Pembro, or should we offer only chemo based on the Checkmate 649? What would be the ideal? Because this seems to be a gray area where 2 different studies have given recommendations in slightly different subgroups.
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, Nandini. So we'd have to decide. I'm assuming you're saying the patient is HER2 negative. You're saying
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, HER2 negative.
5 to 10. So, I think the CPS, at least in the Keynote 590, was they retrospectively, I think, went back.
Yes.
Because it was initially written on TPS, 1 or more. So it's, and CPS is a bit of maybe a subjective thing. But I'm not really sure there's a whole lot of difference between 5 and 10. So I think if the patient is affording and you're planning to, you may give immunotherapy, I think perhaps that should be offered. But again, I can't tell you that we have hard and fast data for this 5 to 10 area.
Any other questions? So Akhil has a question. REAL2 do not have a doublet comparator. Is there any specific subgroup where we can use a triplet if patient can't afford an ICI? So we can use a triplet in patients who are very fit. It's only that the toxicity of triplets and the additional benefit of adding a third drug was not as significant. That is why triplet use is slowly going out of use. But it's not a contraindication if the patient is fit and cannot afford an ICI. Madam, would you like to add to it?
I a little bit disagree. I'm not sure the goal of adding the third drug. So our goal would either be improvement in quality of life or prolongation of survival. So I don't think we have the data that adding a third drug, adding a third chemotherapy drug in prolonged survival, and definitely adds to toxicity. There's no question about it. So I'm not really sure that we can extrapolate that and say, adding immunotherapy prolonged survival and therefore the patient can't afford it, so we add a third drug. So that may not be the best approach. And I agree, REAL2 did not have a triplet combination, and that's because I think the field has moved away from this very aggressive chemotherapy in patients who have a really poor prognosis, right? So their survival with chemotherapy alone is definitely less than a year. So I think that's the reason. So it was just to see whether CAPE can be substituted for 5-FU and Oxali can be substituted for CIS.
So there's another question, ma'am, similar. Can we add trastuzumab to a triplet to a HER2 positive esophageal cancer? Like Folfox or trastuzumab can be used. Folfox and trastuzumab is approved also, but for DOF plus trastuzumab, I'm not sure if there's any data which has evaluated the addition of trastuzumab to docetaxel with Oxali and 5-FU. I'll have to look it up. Ma'am, do you have any comment?
No. So Folfox, yes. Capox, yes. FLOT, 3 drugs, no, not with the taxane and 5-FU, and that would be too much. I am not aware that there is data at least. So I think the field, at least not in our situation, unfortunately, but the field globally is moving towards adding more targeted therapy, more immunotherapy. So there were a lot of trials on trastuzumab plus pertuzumab plus immunotherapy. etc. And then all these new immunotherapies.
So there are two comments, one by Lingrad sir that trastuzumab was a cisplatin, and sir is right. The trial TOGA had cisplatin, not oxaliplatin, but people have extrapolated and then used oxaliplatin instead of cisplatin. So that is right. And Akhil's question is in adeno, what would be the chemotherapy backbone along with ICI? Both have been tried in the Checkmate 649. It was oxali and 5-FU, that 5-fluoropyrimidine, either 5-FU or capecitabine with oxali. And in the Keynote 590, they had used 5-FU cisplatin. So both have been tried. Either one would be appropriate based on the data, but then for convenience and for toxicity profile, people prefer using oxaliplatin over cisplatin. But there's evidence for both these chemotherapy regimens with ICI. Ma'am, Jaya has a question where low dose chemotherapy in frail patients versus PAL-RT alone versus PAL-CARE alone.
Absolutely. So that's a very valid question. And, we had that question as well, hence we were running the trial. But I think we have clear data now from the GoTo trials that that was particularly in older frail patients, whether giving the primary question was whether giving full dose chemotherapy was better than in terms of prolonging survival and patient-related outcomes to low-dose chemotherapy. So that they clearly showed it was non-inferior in terms of survival, but had far better overall treatment utility. So patients felt better, had better quality of life if you gave 60% of K-pop. They also had a subset of patients who were often Nandini, I think you had briefly shown that curve. So the patients who were received chemotherapy versus the patients on best supportive care did do better. Now, that is also a little bit of an extrapolation because those patients who had best supportive care may have been frailer, so they were not actually randomized to best supportive care, but they did get best supportive care. But I think from the meta-analysis, and we had some amount of data that chemotherapy is better and prolonged survival, but a lot of the data and the meta-analysis also was driven by the adenos, not by the squamous. So we don't have direct randomized data that chemotherapy in frail patients prolongs survival. So hence we are overrunning a trial here.
No, what about palliative radiotherapy in these patients? Like for cervix, I'm just thinking the squamous and squamous. So does that help?
Yeah, so we have data that palliative radiotherapy improves their dysphagia, and there is some concept of this dysphagia-free survival, which palliative radiotherapy improves. But there's absolutely zero data that it will improve the quality of life. And there are other mechanisms to improve dysphagia, right? You put in a stent or a feeding tube, things like that. So palliative RT will improve one aspect of their symptomatology, but doesn't prolong survival. Sorry, I think maybe I answered the wrong question. Jaya, you had asked what's the difference between palliative care and chemotherapy?
Yeah. I mean, difference in terms of months. Sorry, I didn't get it in the last slide that you were showing. Like this low dose chemo or chemo in these frail patients versus PAL-CARE alone. What is the magnitude of benefit is what I was trying to ask.
So it won't be huge, right? I mean, I
mean, just to understand. No, Nandini, like in that the slide that you showed, like it is in the order of how many months? Like it is 1 or 2 months, or is it like 6 months?
It was chemo best supportive care was 6.1 versus 3 months. It was 2.9 months longer with chemotherapy as the median overall survival, and the hazard ratio was 0.69 in that paper.
Sure, thanks. Yeah.
And there was a very nice article in JCO last year, I guess, that the delivery of supportive care, so in terms of best supportive care, actually improves survival in esophagus cancer. So that's worth looking at. And that in that they had given all the things that they did in terms of best supportive care, palliative care, etc. Sorry, that's all from me. Back to you, Nandini.
Just a query. So, if the patient is not willing for chemotherapy, is PAL-RT an option, either in elderly patients or not, or it's only for dysphagia that we are getting some benefit? I'm audible, ma'am?
Yes,
Yes,
sorry,
yes,
I was
yes.
just waiting for Nandini. Yeah, only for dysphagia. If there's nothing to palliate, then delivering RT does not make a whole lot of sense.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, just one query. Would when we decide about chemotherapy, none of the studies have like clearly mentioned whether the burden of disease would influence the decision to combine immuno versus chemo versus double like nivo-ipi. So would that probably be a factor which we get patients in very advanced stages as compared to the West? So would that influence our outcomes, whether we would see the same results in our subgroup as compared to the Western population?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that yet. I mean, we are more looking at towards biomarkers and figuring out, there's a patient have an immune signature that will predict responses. So I don't know about the volume of the disease actually.
If there are no other questions, I'll hand over to Kumar sir for the weekly meeting with the residents. Sir.
Thank you. So very nice presentation and a wonderful discussion.